Welcome into this week's edition of the Climate Friday newsletter. Good to have you here. Meteorologist John Burchfield here. We've seen more ice than snow, it seems, this February. And even with the weather pattern being a bit more active the last few weeks, snowfall has still been hard to come by. So we're going to be talking February snowfall, which tends to be feast or famine, especially looking at the last several winters. If you're not already subscribed, WTOL.com/email. That's the place to go for the latest climate-related information each and every week straight to your inbox. So let's break down some of the numbers. February snowfall and where we stand for the season so far, and also what you can expect in the coming weeks. Now, even with the relative activity of the weather pattern, snowfall still well below average. As of Thursday night, 2/13, we are at just a little over 2 inches of snowfall over the course of February. Now, some of you have seen a little more than this, especially north and west of Toledo, with that midweek alert day system that did bring some heavier totals for southeast Michigan, but amounts have been very marginal, at least as of Thursday night. Snowfall totals from this week's winter storm system from Detroit up towards the thumb of Michigan, back towards Flint, Lansing, and Grand Rapids, even down into Kalamazoo, some heavier snowfall amounts. Across northwest Ohio, you'll notice not really a ton of snow reports, more so just ice accretions. Here's some of the data as we break down Wednesday night into Thursday morning's alert day. Up in Lenawee County, there were 2-inch snowfall reports. Monroe, Michigan, 1.7. Really nothing to write home about, but it's the ice that has been our big weather story the last couple of weeks, with significant icing. In Oregon, there was a 2/10 ice report. If you look towards South Toledo, about 0.1. Over towards Ottawa and Sandusky counties, those are some of the hardest hit areas that received close to 1/4 of an inch of ice. And further to the south, near Tiffin and Norwalk, about 1/10 of an inch of ice accretion. But the snow, that has been a different story. Really have not seen much in terms of snow, but other cities in the Midwest have. With yesterday's system, we did see that Milwaukee saw 8.5 inches of snow that came Wednesday. Lansing saw about half a foot. Ann Arbor woke up to 3.6 inches on the ground into Thursday morning. Similar snowfall totals in Detroit. Morenci, Michigan, that is the nearest snowfall total. And these numbers coming from Wednesday into Thursday. Snowfall over the course of the whole winter, when we look at both December, January, and February, sits at only about 8 inches. Now, we are significantly below normal at this point. Typically, through February 13th, we'd have a little over 2 feet of snowfall on the ground, and we are now 17.5 inches below average. Now, we are going to add on a little bit to that this weekend, but we've got a lot of ground to make up for that snowfall deficit. February is a month that is often hit or miss in terms of snowfall. In other words, sometimes we get a little, sometimes we get a lot. The last couple of years have been very, very little. 2024 tied for the least snowy February on record, just half an inch of snow over the course of the entire month. So we've at least surpassed that. 2023, also one of the least snowy on record, with less than 1 inch of snow accumulation. Now, the 3 prior years really on the other end of the spectrum and the other extreme. 2022, 19 inches and change, almost 2 feet of snow in 2021. You remember those pair of winter storm systems. And in 2020, we saw a little over 10 inches of snow accumulation throughout the month of February. Now, the most snow that we've ever seen in February is 2015. You may recall that one. Very cold, very snowy, over 2 feet of snow accumulation, and the least amount of snow. There are several years that have tied for that, but most recently, February of 2024, just half an inch of snow over the duration of the entire month. Snowiest Februaries on record. Snow lovers, these are some that you may remember. 2015 and 2011 come to mind in recent history with over 2 feet of snow. Of course, 1900, back then, weather data was still in its infancy, so to speak. And then 2010, those of you around the turn of the decade there may remember almost 2 feet of snow. And in 2008, another recent year with significant snowfall. Average February comes in at 10.2, and the greatest, that is 2015. So it's kind of interesting. You know, if you look at these 5 snowiest Februaries, 4 of the 5 have occurred since the 2000s, and most of them in the last 1.5 decades. 7 of the 11 snowiest Februaries on record, in fact, have occurred since the year 2000. Now, if you read my full article in the Climate Friday newsletter, I'll explain how, even though this may seem counterintuitive in today's era of climate change, there could actually be a reason. Of course, this isn't really a big enough data set to make any conclusions. However, one of the things with climate change we are seeing as temperatures warm up, there's more moisture, and that moisture can fuel heavier snow. So even with the rise in temperatures, that's not to say winter's not going to hit hard. far. Now, the least snowy Februaries, we also have a few on the list in recent memory. Of course, 2024 tied for the least snowy. There is a three-way tie there between 2024, 1987, and 1899. Coming in at fourth on the list with 0.6 of an inch is 1949, and 2023, only 0.9 of an inch of snow. Now, how is snowfall distributed over the course of the winter season? February is typically the second snowiest month on record of the year with 10.2 inches of accumulation. January takes the cake as the month that typically brings our heaviest snow, and December kind of introduces us to winter with 6.5 inches of accumulation. Last winter was historic on so many fronts, just a trace of snow in December and 0.5 inch of snow in February. So we went 2 straight months that were the least snowy on record. January at least gave us something, but really this winter, at least we've been a bit more in terms of snowfall than last year. So how is climate change affecting our winter season and winter weather in general? As a whole, most cities are seeing less snow than normal, at least compared to where we were in the 1970s. Now, interestingly, a lot of these cities shown by those red dots that are seeing less snow are those cities in the central portion of the United States. There's a lot of northern cities that are seeing a bit more snow, but as a whole, 64% of U.S. cities, and this is based on examining 2,000 climate sites across the country, 64% of those 2,000 now get less snow than they did during the 70s. Now, Toledo has actually seen some snowy Februaries in recent years. However, climate change is certainly playing a role in that most cities are seeing less snow, but there is still kind of an association that we are seeing with rising temperatures and more moisture. Now, speaking of rising temperatures, if you're not a fan of the snow, you have this to look forward to. By the end of February, our average high spikes up to 42 degrees, and we've come a long way in the temperature department from the winter bottom. The coldest we get all season is 34 degrees, and that is a span from January 15 to 26. So some signs of spring with warming temperatures by the end of the month. Now, that being said, our weather pattern is likely to remain very cold. Even though we're going to see a break from the active storm track, the weather pattern through the end of February, this map takes us through the 27th, and the blue color shows you below average temperatures. It is very likely we're going to stay chillier than normal. We're going to have the updates every Friday in the Climate Friday newsletter, breaking down climate change information, as well as just in-depth weather forecast information and how it pertains to you. You can subscribe at WTOL.com/email. We will see you next week.